Thank you. Last night, had you turn to Hebrews 11, and I was a little bit nervous, but I think it actually kind of goes complementary pretty well with what God was already kind of leading for this evening. So it fits pretty well together. This idea of faith is simply defined, and I don't remember exactly. He gave a definition last night. I don't remember exactly what his was, but it was pretty similar to this. Faith is simply defined as complete trust or confidence in someone or something. I looked at a few different sources because I thought it was interesting. It specified in multiple different areas that I looked up this word faith. It specified complete trust or confidence. All of them use this same idea of complete. The idea of trust or confidence would be pretty simple if it weren't for that word complete. We have confidence in a lot of things. Sometimes we have confidence in ourselves, that we are confident that if I put my mind to do something, I can do it. We kind of get that idea that if I really want to and I really work hard, I can accomplish this. Last month, I think it was, Josh and I ran a half marathon 2 days after Thanksgiving. I'm running the Seattle half marathon, and I have a goal time that I'm aiming to hit. I've run 13.1 miles at this point quite a few times. I've completed a half marathon at this point because when Josh runs with me, he pushes me to run faster. I've even done it in my goal time. So I've done it. I'm confident that I can do it again. We have confidence in ourselves. Sometimes we have confidence in other people. I had this conversation, or I had a similar conversation with one of the guys who works for me earlier this week. He had a customer that was giving him a hard time, and it caused him to start doubting himself. And I told him, I have confidence that you can do this. I have confidence that you know what you're doing. We have confidence in people, confidence that they're capable, confidence that they will do what they say they're going to do. They promised this, or they said they would do this, and I believe them and have confidence that they're going to follow through. Confidence that they're capable, that they have the physical ability to do what they said. Sometimes we have confidence in things. I've used this example before. You drove here tonight confident that your car would get here. Most of us in this room, I think, have a reliable enough vehicle that you didn't walk out the door, headed to church, thinking, I sure hope my car makes it to church tonight. Without even realizing it, most of the time, we just walk out to our car, fire it up, and go where we're going, confident that it's going to get us there. You were confident that it would start. You were confident that the wheel wouldn't fall off while you're driving down the road. Sometimes that happens, doesn't it, Josh? That the wheel falls off while you're driving down the road. I just saw a memory about this. It was about a year ago that we were driving Josh's truck. He was driving his truck, and a loud noise happened. And we looked, and his driver rear tire was passing us as we're driving down the road. It happens sometimes, but you don't get in your car and think, boy, I sure hope my tire doesn't fly off while I'm driving down the road. You're confident that whoever attached it knew what they were doing and that the part wouldn't fail. You didn't even know you were confident in that, and you were confident in that coming here tonight. You're confident when you got here this evening. Again, I've used this example. You were confident when you walked in here this evening that the chair you're currently sitting in would stay together. No one walked into church. I watched. I was in here. No one walked into church and checked your chair to make sure it wouldn't fall apart when you sat down. You have confidence. We have confidence in a lot of things, but not complete. Complete is a struggle. So some of those same examples. While I have confidence in myself, I mentioned the half marathon. While I have confidence in myself that I can finish that race in my goal time, there's always that thought of, yeah, but what if I can't? While you have confidence in people, the moment that they are late to deliver on what they said they were going to do, we start to question. That confidence is not complete. We have confidence in things, but the moment your car starts to make a funny noise, you immediately question the reliability of your car. If you turn the key and it takes a half a second longer to fire, you're sitting there thinking, what's wrong with my car? Something wrong with this thing. Immediately, this thing has never failed you, but immediately your confidence is there. The complete part is where faith gets hard. Spiritually is no different. I would venture to say that every person in this room this evening has confidence that God is who He says He is. And you have confidence that God will do what He has promised to do. But complete? Or is it that I have confidence in God, but when He doesn't come through when I think He should, we start to question if He'll come through at all? I have confidence that God will bring me through this trial. God, you will bring me through this trial, right? Think about these verses, verse 11 through 16. This is still introduction, but it's so needful for us. These verses refer to faith both as substance and evidence. Substance is usually thought of as something tangible. You know, if it's something of substance, that's something you can touch with your hands, something you can hold, something you can see with your eyes. When you say that, you know, this thing has some substance to it, you're not meaning that it's small. You're saying that it has some size to it, that it's real. Refers to faith as evidence. Evidence proves the truth of something. The police will look for evidence at a crime scene so that they can use it to determine the truth. Faith is proof. We often think, I have faith, but it sure would be nice to have some proof. Don't we? We think, you know, I have faith, I believe, but it sure would be nice to see. It sure would be nice to have some proof. It's what Gideon did. Gideon wanted God to show him that he was really God before he'd step out for him. He wanted proof. Faith is proof. When you have complete confidence, that's proof enough. The minute that you and I start to ask God for proof, that shows a lack of confidence. Faith in God, by its true definition of complete confidence in Him, is a choice that we make because it won't come naturally. By nature, we doubt. By nature, we question. So if we're going to have faith, complete confidence in God, faith like we see examples of throughout the Bible, specifically in Hebrews 11, it takes a choice. I'm just going to make this statement to start us off because He deserves it. God's shown Himself faithful so many times. God has proved Himself so many times. God has come through for His people. Specifically, He's come through for you so many times in the past that He deserves that we have complete confidence in Him. So with kind of all of that to set us up tonight, I want to look at this chapter, or at least the first 16 verses of it. And I have three things that I want us to notice in this. The choice of faith. Number one is faith to understand. Faith brings understanding. Look at verse 3 with me. Through faith, we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. Through faith, we understand. There are a lot of things about life we don't understand. There are struggles and trials that in life that we face that, simply put, we don't understand why we face them. You know, we have maybe a personal battle that goes on in your life, and we think, well, I don't understand why I have to go through this. Or we have maybe a health issue come up, and we don't understand why we're going through them. I was thinking about it while studying for this. Beginning of this year, I started New Year's Day off in the ER with a blood clot. I didn't understand that. I still don't understand that. Okay, so I wrote this before I heard what my dad said. I think of myself as a relatively young person who's healthy and active. My dad called me old tonight. I'm not sure. My obnoxious side wants to say if I'm old and he's my dad, but I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I just left it to your imagination to take it the rest of the way. No, but we look at those sorts of things and we don't understand why those things happen. We don't understand why we have to face that, or we have maybe a family issue and we don't understand why we're going through this. Why do I have to face that? Especially often we'll look at others and we think, well, they're not having to go through that. Why do I? Family trials are some of the hardest things because of the emotional attachments that come along with it. Sometimes it's a matter of things that are happening in our world that we just don't understand. We look at the things that are going on in our world right now, and there's a whole lot of it that just doesn't make sense. It can be intimidating things that makes no sense at all. And let's be honest, as much as we try to trust God, if we're being honest, sometimes those things can cause us to question. But faith can cause us to understand. Faith sheds light on the world that we live in. The reality of the matter is, we live in a sin-sick world. All the trials that we face and the health issues that we face and the family issues that we face and the crazy things happening in our world, all of that boils down to that fact that we live in a sin-filled world. And it doesn't matter where you go. We live in a sin-filled world. This last little bit, my family has done a decent amount of traveling. It doesn't matter if you live in the Pacific Northwest or the Bible Belt or the Midwest. Sin is everywhere. While we were traveling, Josh and I, everywhere that we went, Josh and I went for a run together in the morning. We're talking everywhere from the Pacific Northwest to the Bible Belt in Oklahoma, and where else did we run? Missouri and Indiana. Everywhere, I thought this was interesting. Every place we went, when we asked people, where should we go run? We got the same answer. Just be careful of homeless and drug people. Didn't matter which state we were in. We tend to think, oh, well, it's worse where I am. We live in a sin-filled world, not just our area. Because it's everywhere in our country and in our world, because we live in a sin-filled world. Faith gives an understanding of the world that we live in. More than that, faith sheds light on that God is still in control. Passage that we started in verse 3, through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. The passage that we started in, it tells us the worlds were framed by Him, and we understand that. I don't think anyone here has doubt of that, but we have a struggle sometimes seeing that He's still in control. Like, we all in this room agree, yeah, God created it all, but that He's still in control. With everything happening in our world, can He be? Just going to say there's something we can have complete confidence in. God always has been, is right now, and always will be still on His throne. We see things that happen in our world, and we somehow get this idea that, again, God could not possibly be in control of this. I think we recognize that He will come back someday and set it right, but we somehow get the view that the reason things are the way they are and the reason there are the problems that there are is because He currently isn't in control. I had someone who told me that not that many years ago, that, well, it's kind of a God and Satan battling, and so that's why, sometimes God's in control and sometimes He isn't. No, God is still on His throne. He's still in control. Faith helps us understand that. It sheds light on that He's still in control. Faith helps us understand by shedding light on what our world needs. I mentioned we live in a sin-filled world. Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 through 16. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick. And it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Faith, complete confidence in God and in His plan, helps us to see that what our world needs is light. What our world needs is not new politics. What our world needs is not some sort of political reform or those sorts of things. What our world doesn't need a new leadership or those sorts of things. What our world needs is Christ. And the way that happens is through you spreading your light. We know that passage, Matthew chapter 5, 14 through 16, is not an common passage. We know that verse. We know, for many of us at least, know the kids' song, hide it under a bushel, no. And yet very often that's what we do. We know we're supposed to be a light, and we know it should be set on a candlestick so that it lights the house like the passage talks about, but we hide it. If we have confidence in God, it helps us to understand that what our world needs is Him. And His plan requires that I be that light. Faith to understand. Number 2, faith to obey. We're going to look at verse 4, 7, and 8 for this point. By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. Skip down to verse 7. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark, to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Verse 8, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. Reality is, we could look at all sorts of examples throughout this chapter and really throughout the Bible of those who had faith to obey God. I've said this earlier in this message and messages before. Faith doesn't come naturally. Doing the will of God does not come naturally. We know the Great Commission, but it doesn't come naturally for you to go to strangers and tell them the gospel. It doesn't come naturally to go talk to someone, invite them to come to church. Just looking at the verse we did just a minute ago in Matthew chapter 5, it does not come natural to be a light in a dark place. Because if you're going to be a light in a dark place, you're going to stand out. That's going to draw some unwanted attention to yourself if you are in darkness and you are the light. It's going to draw some focus. It's going to take faith to obey. Look at this in a few different ways. Faith to obey the leading of God. Psalm chapter 23, or Psalm 23, I'm not going to be turned there right now, but it refers to God leading us in green pastures and so forth. But we have to have the faith to follow that leading. You know why it works for sheep to follow the shepherd? Because they trust the shepherd. The reason it works is they know that the shepherd has their best interest in mind. They have complete confidence that he is going to protect them and that he is going to lead them to a place of safety and refuge and where they ought to be. The same is true of God. He desires to lead you. And while life is not always easy and there may be some hard paths along the way, He knows what's best for you. And where He's leading you is a place of safety and refuge, and more importantly, He's leading you where you ought to be. But you have to have faith to obey the leading of God. Faith to obey the will of God. I said this, I think a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, that God will often push us outside of our comfort zone. And our reaction is to hesitate. It's to push back. But it's not pushing back, hesitating is not complete confidence in Him. That isn't faith. If God's leading me to do something for Him and I'm fighting against it, then I'm not having faith in Him. I think of many of the examples in Hebrews 11 that the will and the leading of God pushes most that are in Hebrews 11 outside of their comfort zone. Had them going places that they didn't want to go. It had them doing things that would be difficult. It had them following, though they had no idea where they were going. It's faith to obey the will of God. Faith to obey when you don't understand. We just read verse 7 and 8. I'm not going to have us read it again, but it talks about both Noah in verse 7, and then it goes to Abraham in verse 8. These two men had faith to obey when they could not have possibly understood what was going on. Noah could not have possibly understood what God was having him do. He had no idea what a flood was. In that time, he wouldn't have even known what rain was. Before this point, God watered the earth from dew. So the idea of a flood coming from a massive amount of rain and building an ark, nothing about that would have made sense. Everything about that was foreign. I'm not going to have us turn back there right now, but Noah would not have understood what God was saying, and yet we don't see Noah questioning God. It's an amazing thing to me. Anytime I read it, it's an amazing thing to me. We don't even see Noah really asking for details, even when it took years. Remember, I said it's pretty easy to have confidence, but sometimes it gets hard to have complete confidence when it doesn't happen in the timeline we expect. It was more than 100 years that Noah waited. I mean, I don't think we could fault him after 100 years and God had not yet brought a drop of rain, that you might start to question, God, did you do this just so I'd look like the crazy person in town? Like, what was the reason for this, God? I know you had a purpose, but I just don't understand it. But we don't see that, do we? We just see him obey. He had faith to obey, even though he didn't understand. Abraham, that talks about in verse 8 and continues on with Abraham for a couple verses after that, God led him to leave where he was without even telling him where he was going. Just go and I'll tell you when and where to stop. I don't think there's any way that Abraham could have understood that. Yet he obeyed. Why? Because he had complete confidence in God. Faith to obey. So far we've seen a faith to understand, faith to obey, and lastly this evening, faith to receive. Look at verse, I think I'm going to have us read 11 through 16. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang there even of one and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly, wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Faith to receive. Faith to receive the promise. Sarah's is where this starts. And I'm not going to have us go through, all of it. I know that there was some doubting in Sarah. Bible tells us the whole thing of her laughing in her heart when God had told her that she was going to have a son, and she kind of almost mocks God with that, of, yeah, sure, that's really going to happen to me. And then you have the mess of her giving her husband her handmaid because God didn't deliver in her timeline. Again, that idea of, well, I have confidence in God, but when he doesn't do it in my timeline, I have to figure out my own way. So she took things in her own hands, and we could preach an entire other message on that. But despite that, she's listed in the group of those who had faith. It's kind of an interesting thing. We read her story, and there's multiple instances where she did not. Where she questioned God, where she questioned God's timeline, she questioned God's ability. Yet she's listed as one of those who have faith, which I think is of note, and at least for me, is of encouragement. Because Sarah was not perfect at this faith thing, and still received the promised child. Which is good, because you won't be perfect at it either. But God is still faithful. So you have Sarah receive the promise. Sarah, then notice those who received not. Verse 13, I'll just read the first part of it. These all died in faith, not having received the promises. I want to quickly point this out. Verse 13, talking about those who died not having received the promise. There are times that the promise that God gives, or the way he is leading, we never see. But it does not change his faithfulness. And though we may not see it in our lives, He still always delivers. He is still faithful to his promise. Faith to receive the promise, and then faith to receive a better home. Verse 16, we saw that. But now they desire a better country. That is in heavenly. And it goes on from there. Complete confidence that this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. I understand that life on earth is hard, but this earth is not my destination. And I can go through the struggles of this life knowing that it's only a matter of time and God has prepared for me a better home. A heavenly. And that can give us what we need to stay on the path that God has laid out for us. The conclusion this evening, here's where this choice of faith all comes down to. Complete confidence in God. Faith to understand, faith to obey, faith to receive. But I've said this a couple of times throughout this message, faith doesn't come easy. You can't see it. You can't grasp it. You can't hold on to it. It's a choice that you have to make just trusting God. The choice that you have to make to have complete confidence in Him. That what He says He will do, He does. I don't know about you, but I want to have the testimony of these listed in this chapter. Not a perfect man. I have my faults. The verses, the characters that are listed in this chapter all had their faults, but are all listed as men and women of faith that despite their faults, trusted God. Complete confidence in Him. That ought to be the desire of each one of us. We're not going to be perfect, and we're not going to do it just right every time. But we ought to desire to have a complete confidence in Him. And then, the things that we don't understand, and the struggles that we face, and the things going on in our world really don't matter. Because I know I can trust Him. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for the confidence that we can have in you. There are so many things that let us down, that don't go how we expect, that we can't rely on, we can't trust, we can't have faith in. Lord, thank you for the confidence that we can have in you, that complete confidence knowing you will deliver. It may not be in my time or my way, but you will deliver. Lord, I pray that you'll help us, Lord, to truly strive to have that kind of faith in you. Not a faith that is there when things are going our way. Not a faith that's there when you are blessing and things feel right. But a complete confidence in you, knowing that no matter what is happening in my world, you're still in control. No matter what's happening in my life, you're still going to deliver on your promises. I pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Believing that God is and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him, we move